But in the most dynamic pulsations of the mind and emotion, can you still confess you are untouched? You see? Something feels touched. You're a sentient being, no? So something is going to feel touched and move, but that is a movement in the immensity of the untouched one. When we spoke before, and I say that every perception, is like a kind of happening. Something happens, and then something logs into this happening, and then it identifies with it. And the more identity there is in it, the more it is preserved in memory as a happening. But every happening is in time and a kind of measurement of time and context and intensity, they may say. So every happening happens in the infiniteness of the non-happening. If you understand this. No? Like this, the background, the space is untouched. It allows a seeming happening to happen and to unhappen, but hit the perceiving space does not happen. You see? Now, this is not food for thought. But if you sit with that and watch it, break it down frame by frame and observe what is a happening? What is a happening? Does a happening perceive itself? What is it that perceives the happening? It must be some entity that is somehow partially connected to or interested in that happening. You see? Yeah. So even that one who is engaged with the happening, say, "Oh, this is happening to me." This one who says, "This thing is happening to me. How can I stop it?" This one also is a happening. Who grasps this thing? You see, because of the habit of identifying by habit with this one, because of the habit of identifying this one, we take that to be the fact of who we are. And you forget, when I speak now, I'm revealing to you greater space than that, in which that one that you're calling yourself, who is saying, "Yeah, but how can I change this happening? How can I become stable in that one become also observable as a kind of happening, a movement?" Does the non-happening suffer from the happening? Any number of happenings have happened and have finished their happenings. Can you reach back into the past and relive a happening? The only contact you have with it is through memory. And memory itself is subjective. So to whom is the things happen? You see? So for such things, you have to sit with them. Sitting with them means that you are able to look and confirm experientially the unreality of the things you perceive and previously thought were true. And in the clear light of seeing, their power is broken, you see. And also that you are not perceiving them with the feeling that you are a person perceiving something, when the person itself is the object of perception. You see? What is that in which even the person who formerly was acting as also a perceiver is perceived? Then what remains? Remember I told you this excellent example of the birds in the tree. I said, if you imagine there's a tree, a very tall tree, and on one of the branches there's a bird that is building a nest for its babies. The babies are there, and it can be still building the nest and going off and getting food, worms and so on, bringing them back for the baby chicks. This bird is busy. And this bird represents our active, dynamic life, where we are concerned about career and marriage and a relationship and future and security and all these things. So that's called the first bird. This representative of our dynamic life, our ambitions, our hopes and aspirations for future and so on. Now I say on a branch just above that first bird branch sits another bird that looks very much like that first bird. But this bird is not building anything at all. It is just quietly looking. In its field of view is the first bird, but also it can perceive the moon and the stars, and it can feel the wind and everything, but he's not doing anything. It only quietly observes. This bird represents an ability within us to perceive, but detachedly. It's like it's witnessing. Sometimes I try to make an example of like a camera that you can look and see everything through, but it has no film in it. So it's not recording. You can click, but it's no recording. A camera, no SD card. But this example is not complete because the one who looks can take an impression and can also choose not to. It just quietly looks. What protects it from making an imprint of what it sees would be that it already has come to the recognition of the source from which it has come. No? It's like there's some invisible umbilical cord that connects it to an absoluteness that is without form. And so it is one with that absoluteness. I sometimes call it the child of the absolute, meaning that this is the one who experiences the world, but is detached from the world, the one for whom the world was made. He is in you. For a while we are in the world and we live very much as a citizen of the world and looking at our ambitions in life. To the final breath we are still invested in life and in the things of life and so on. And if you are lucky, you move to a deeper position, what I may call like the second breath position, where you begin to observe more and identify less. In the field of the observing bird, actions, interactions, reactions are perceived, but it is not personally identified, it's not attached to them. So these functions, it can taste them, but it is not addicted to them. It gets used to observing things, but it's not attached to the things it's observing. When it's not attached to the things it's observing, it begins to observe its own environment, its own being. It's like it's living in the juice of its own being, and that becomes its... I'm finding that my mouth want to say is its experience, but it and its experience are one. That is when you can say, I'm going, but I'm not going. I'm doing, but I'm not doing. I'm leaving, but I'm not leaving. That kind of paradox, you might speak. Something seems to be going. In my dynamic expression, these things are happening. But in the field of the witnessing self, nothing is happening. You see? That is when your consciousness is becoming so refined. No? It's not suffering the manifestation. No? It's not addicted to it. It's not pursuing it. It doesn't feel, therefore, any sense of incompleteness. The concept of future is not exciting to it. What has passed is not held by it. What is this state, if we want to call it a state? It is not an answer that I'm going to give you a score for. You are the answer, actually. Not just you know the answer, but you are also the answer. You are the answer and you're not an answer also. And it's not a riddle. I mean, there's no riddle for the self. Is not perplexed by anything. It doesn't acknowledge anything to be so significant that it can be caused to feel disabled by anything at all. It is without aspiration, without need. Yet in the dynamic aspect of itself, its self-portrait as consciousness and as a dynamic entity, this is in time and is always changeful. But when you know and are what you are, only this one can move in the world beautifully, not troubled, not addicted to the senses or the mind. So therefore, the life of this one is excellent, yet is not attached, you see. It doesn't curse the world, it doesn't dismiss it as mere illusion, can do also. Strangely, by being nothing, love shines from this one also. Knowing that none of this exists without it. Yet it exists without all of this also, and with it. Now, if we listen to these things in the mind, it might seem like it's really ungraspable. Wow, I've got a long way to go, and all this is dream, all this is illusion. How to end this illusion, you see? And who will receive that advice even? The mind itself is an experience. At a certain stage, you see. The mind itself is something, is also an object of perception. And its content. You have to be able to relate to what I'm speaking, otherwise it's of no use to you. You see, I am not going to go sniping one by one at any concept, because you cannot come to the end of them. I'm trying to show you to throw a net over the whole thing. But nothing can throw a net over what you are. What is this net that you can throw over and catch all the concepts, all of them together, including the concept of a net and throwing one? You have to come to zero.